Hello, I'm William Cook, and this is my Week 2 discussion thread for Liberty University's American Revolution class under Dr. Smith. I decided to do my report on James Byrd's book, The Sacred Scriptures, Sacred War, Chapter 2, actually called God of War. Now, what this chapter discussed is it outlined the comparisons of the American Revolution to that of the book of Exodus. Exodus was Moses leading the Israelites out of slavery and bondage from Egyptians. Now, as you could probably guess, the comparison here, Americans are the Israelites escaping the tyranny of Great Britain, who in the comparison is Egypt. Now, this was a very important aspect of the Founding Fathers because you wanted to draw the holy aspect of the war and justify it to the American soldiers. And it was very important that it was almost made it to the seal of America. There was a huge debate on what should be on there, and a lot of comparisons to Exodus was thrown out there. One famous one by Ben Franklin was resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. Now, ultimately, these were scrapped, but it is a very good clue as to how this was important to our Founding Fathers. Now, it wasn't just the Founding Fathers that found it important. The military leaders actually wanted to drive home the military aspect. George Washington was known to be a huge defender of the chaplains. He said the chaplains' work was absolutely essential for sustaining the enormous sacrifices required of the soldiers and for assuring the army that God was on their side. Now, that's a very good clue as to how important and justifying the holy aspect of the war was, not only to the Founding Fathers, but to the military leaders, and then the church leaders. There's a pastor by the name of William Foster who talked about the Independence Hurricane. Now, it was a hurricane that actually pushed the naval front back, and he compared this obviously to the parting of the Red Sea, allowing the Israelites through, and then collapsing, and he was quoted to say, "See how Pharaoh's chariots and his hosts were cast into the sea, they sank as lead in mighty waters." Now, they outlined several aspects of when weather played an aspect, and that being God directly interfering in the assistance of America during the war. Another thing they talked about was how to justify Great Britain as evil. And they compare it to the Battle of, or not compare, but they talk about the Battle of Lexington and Concord, where the British soldiers were notably brutal, and that was a key aspect that they held on to in remembering Concord, the brutality of the British soldiers, and how they talked about how they were evil, and this was evident of that. Another comparison they talk about was the comparison of slavery, how the British tyranny was equivalent of slavery to the Americans. Patrick Henry, who gave the famous speech, "Give me liberty or give me death," is quoted in the speech to be saying, "What would they have? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God." Now, it was very clear the Founding Fathers felt that they were being completely enslaved to the tyrant ruler King George. However, and the chapter discusses this, that Great Britain was quick to point out the hypocrisy because America at that point still had thousands of slaves. David, by the name of a pastor by the name of David in Savannah, drew direct comparisons as to how many black free men actually fought in the American Revolution and helped win the war. Lemuel Haynes, author of Liberty Further Extended, or Free Thoughts of the Illegality of Slave Keeping, talks about how liberty is as precious to a black man as it is to a white man, and then further discussing how liberty applies to all people and how the battle of tyranny must be fought in all forms.